Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Hughes Harmony, watching the stars drift past the view screen. The ship moved quietly through space, carrying its crew of 42 humans toward another diplomatic mission. Jake had been doing this job for 8 years now, and he still found it strange how other species reacted to humans. "Captain, we're getting a message from Kepler Prime," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her station. She was young, maybe 25, with bright eyes that still showed excitement about space travel. "Ambassador Rodriguez is ready for us." Jake nodded. Paul Rodriguez was one of the best diplomats in human space. If anyone could stop the growing tension between the Vorthic Empire and the Zephyrian Collective, it would be Paul. The two alien species had been arguing over territory for months, and their disagreement was getting worse. Dr. Lisa Carter walked onto the bridge, carrying her tablet full of notes about alien cultures. She had been studying how different species saw humans for the past 3 years. Her research was both fascinating and troubling. "Any new insights about our passengers?" Jake asked her. Lisa glanced toward the guest quarters, where 3 Vorthok and 2 Zephyrians were staying. "The Vorthic delegation keeps laughing when they hear our standard protocols. They think our peaceful approach is funny. And the Zephyrians? They're more polite, but I can tell they don't take us seriously either. To them, we're just soft creatures who talk too much and fight too little." Jake had heard this before. In the 50 years since humans joined the Galactic Federation, they had built a reputation as peacemakers. Other species called them when they needed someone to calm down angry neighbors or negotiate trade deals. Humans were good at listening, finding compromise, and avoiding violence. But Jake sometimes wondered if being known as peaceful was the same as being respected. The Hughes Harmony reached Kepler Prime 6 hours later. The space station was huge, built by the Federation as a neutral meeting place. Ships from dozens of different species docked there every day to trade, negotiate, or just refuel. Ambassador Paul Rodriguez met them at the airlock. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, but Jake could see stress lines on his face. This negotiation was important. "How bad is it?" Jake asked as they walked through the station corridors. "Bad," Paul said quietly. "The Vorthic want 3 systems that the Zephyrians consider sacred. The Zephyrians won't give them up, and the Vorthic are talking about taking them by force." They entered the main conference room where the 2 alien delegations waited. The Vorthic were large reptilian creatures with sharp teeth and scales that looked like armor. Their leader, a massive warrior named Krothvar, dominated his side of the table. The Zephyrians were smaller, insect-like beings with multiple arms and compound eyes. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of the same machine. "Ah, the human peacemakers arrive," Krothvar said, his voice deep and mocking. "Come to tell us to be nice to each other?" The Zephyrian speaker, called Unit Prime, made a clicking sound that Lisa had learned meant amusement. "Perhaps they will offer use flowers and ask us to sing songs of friendship." Paul sat down calmly and opened his files. Jake and Lisa took seats behind him, there to observe and learn. This was how human diplomacy worked: quiet, patient, focused on finding solutions that worked for everyone. "I understand there are disagreements about the Helix systems," Paul began. Krothvar slammed his clawed hand on the table. "There is no disagreement. Those systems belong to the strong. We are strong. The Zephyrians are weak. The Helix systems contain the burial grounds of 17 Zephyrian hive clusters." Unit Prime responded, their voice flat but somehow conveying anger. "Your strength means nothing to the dead." "The dead don't need planets," Krothvar growled. Paul raised his hand slowly. "Both sides have valid points. The Vorthic need resources for their growing population. The Zephyrians need to protect their cultural sites. Perhaps we can find a solution that honors both needs. For the next 4 hours, Paul worked with both sides. He suggested sharing arrangements, proposed alternative systems the Vorthok could colonize, and offered Federation support for Zephyrian cultural preservation. Jake watched the alien delegates' faces as Paul spoke, and he could see they weren't really listening. The Vorthok saw compromise as weakness. To them, the strong took what they wanted, and the weak accepted it. The Zephyrians operated as a collective mind, making decisions based on logic and efficiency. Neither species understood human concepts like fairness or mutual benefit. As the day wore on, tempers grew worse. Krathvar stood up several times, towering over the table. Unit primes clicking became sharper and more rapid. Paul remained calm, but Jake could see his jaw getting tighter. Finally, as the station's artificial sun began to dim for the night cycle, Krathvar had enough. "This is waste of time," he declared. "Humans think words solve everything. You are weak creatures who hide behind talk because you cannot fight." "We are not weak," Paul said quietly. "We choose peace because it works better than war." Unit Prime made that clicking sound again. "Choice implies you could choose otherwise. Your species has no warrior tradition. You have no concept of real strength." Lisa leaned forward slightly. Her research had taught her a lot about how aliens saw humans, but hearing it directly still stung. Other species really did think humans were naturally weak. Paul stood up slowly. His voice stayed calm, but something in his tone changed. "We have made our choice carefully. We prefer peace because we have seen what happens without it. But please, don't mistake our choice for inability." Krathvar laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "The human makes threats now." "How amusing." "It's not a threat," Paul said. "It's a request. Please don't make us mad. You won't like what happens next." The room fell silent for a moment. Then both alien delegations began making sounds that Jake realized were laughter. The Vorthok roared with amusement, while the Zephyrians clicked rapidly. "Did you hear that?" Krathvar said to his companions. The human said, "Please don't make us mad," as if we should fear their anger. Unit Prime addressed the other Zephyrians. "Record this moment. The peaceful species issues warnings. Most inefficient behavioral pattern." Paul gathered his files calmly. "The offer for negotiation remains open. Think about what I've said." As the humans left the conference room, Jake could hear the aliens still laughing behind them. The sound followed them down the corridor. That night in his quarters, Jake couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the laughter, about the way the aliens had dismissed Paul's warning. Humans had been saying, "Please don't make us mad," for 50 years now, whenever tensions got high. It had become their signature phrase across the galaxy. But as Jake stared out his window at the stars, he wondered if other species had ever asked themselves why humans always said "please" before warning about their anger. Maybe they assumed it was because humans were polite. Maybe they thought it showed weakness. Jake had been born after humans joined the Federation. He had grown up in a peaceful galaxy where humans were known as diplomats and teachers. But sometimes, late at night, he wondered about the time before. What had humans been like before they chose peace? He thought about Paul's words. "We prefer peace because we have seen what happens without it." What exactly had humans seen? And why did they always ask so nicely before warning people not to make them angry? The next morning brought bad news. During the night, Krathvar had sent a message to the Vorthok fleet. The negotiation was over. Within 3 days, Vorthok warships would begin moving toward the Helix systems. Paul tried one more time to reach both sides, but the aliens had made up their minds. The Vorthok would take what they wanted. The Zephyrians would fight to protect their sacred sites. War was coming. As the UE's Harmony prepared to leave Kepler Prime, Jake watched the alien ships departing in different directions. Soon they would meet again in battle. Another failure, Amy Brooks said sadly. Maybe, Paul said, but his voice carried something Jake had never heard before. Or maybe they'll remember that we asked nicely. Jake looked at the ambassador's face and saw something that surprised him. Paul wasn't disappointed about the failed negotiation. He looked almost ready. Ready for what? Jake couldn't say. But as the Harmony jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of the coming war back to human space, Jake had the strange feeling that something was about to change, something the galaxy wasn't expecting. 3 months after the failed negotiations at Kepler Prime, Commander Ben Taylor watched enemy ships appear on his screens. The Vorthic fleet had finally come to New Colorado, just as everyone knew they would. Ben stood in the command center of a planetary defense station, looking at the peaceful farms and cities below. New Colorado was home to 30,000 humans who had come here to grow food and raise families. They had no military bases, no weapons factories, just fields of wheat and corn that fed other worlds. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Vorthok." "Fleet," said Sergeant Linda Hayes from her communications station. "Put it through." Ben said. The screen filled with the massive face of War Chief Scareth, the Vorthic commander who had taken over after Krothvar died in the first battle with the Zephyrians. Scareth was even bigger than his predecessor, with scars across his scaled face and teeth that looked like knives. "Human settlement," Scareth's voice boomed across the channel. "You will surrender this world immediately. We require your farming systems for our growing empire." Ben looked at his small team of defense coordinators. New Colorado had 12 orbital platforms with basic shields and communications equipment. They had no weapons, no military ships, nothing that could stop a Vorthic war fleet. "War Chief Scareth," Ben said calmly, "this world is protected under Federation law. These are civilian farms, not military targets." Scareth laughed, that grinding sound that Vorthic made when they found something amusing. "Federation law means nothing now. The Zephyrians learned this when we took their sacred systems. Now you will learn it too." Behind Scareth, Ben could see other Vorthic warriors making the same laughing sounds. In the past 3 months, the Vorthic had conquered 6 systems. They had destroyed Zephyrian hive cities, taken their planets, and sent the survivors fleeing to other parts of the galaxy. The Federation had done nothing. The other member species talked about sanctions and diplomatic protests, but nobody wanted to fight the Vorthic military machine. "I'm going to give you the same warning our diplomats gave you," Ben said. "Please don't make us mad. You won't like what happens." The laughter from the Vorthic ship got louder. Scareth leaned closer to his screen, showing his massive teeth. "Did you hear that, warriors?" he called to his crew. The humans said, "Please don't make us mad. The farmer humans think they can frighten us with their anger." The sound of Vorthic laughter filled Ben's command center. His staff looked embarrassed and afraid. The warning that humans had been giving for 50 years sounded foolish when faced with real warships and real weapons. "You have 1 hour to evacuate your people," Scareth said, still chuckling. "After that, we will take this world whether you are on it or not." The transmission ended, leaving Ben's command center in silence. "Sir," said Lieutenant Bob Carter, "should we contact Earth? Ask for military support?" Ben looked at the young officer. Bob was 23 years old, born and raised on New Colorado. He had never seen war, never imagined that anyone would attack peaceful farmers. "Earth doesn't have military ships in this sector," Ben said quietly. "The nearest Federation fleet is 6 days away." What Ben didn't say was that the Federation fleets weren't coming anyway. 3 months of Vorthic attacks had shown the galaxy that nobody wanted to fight them. The Vorthic were too strong, too aggressive, too willing to destroy anyone who opposed them. For the next hour, Ben coordinated the evacuation. Transport ships rushed to the surface to pick up families, farmers, teachers, and children. Some people refused to leave their homes. Others couldn't understand why anyone would attack a farming world. Ben watched the ships carrying his people away from the world they had built. 30,000 humans had made New Colorado into something beautiful. They had turned empty land into fields that fed other worlds. They had built schools and hospitals and parks where children played dot. Now they were running away because aliens with bigger guns wanted their planet. When the hour was up, Scareth contacted Ben again. "Are you ready to surrender, human?" "Most of our people are gone," Ben said, "but I'm staying. This is my home." "Then you will die with it," Scareth replied. Ben looked around his command center. Linda Hayes had stayed, along with Bob Carter and 6 other officers. They were all young, all born on New Colorado, all unwilling to abandon their world without witnessing what happened to it. "This is Commander Ben Taylor of New Colorado Defense." Ben broadcast on all frequencies. "To any ships in this system, to any Federation listening posts, to anyone who can hear this transmission, we are under attack by the Vorthic Empire. We asked them politely to leave us alone. They refused." He paused, looking at the Vorthic fleet on his screens. "Please don't make us mad," he said one more time. That the Vorthic attack began immediately. Their warships fired on the orbital platforms, destroying Ben's shields and communications equipment. Then they turned their weapons on the planet. Below. Ben watched his world burn. The wheat fields that had fed millions of people across 3 systems turned to ash. The cities where children had played became craters. The hospitals where human doctors had saved lives from dozens of different species were destroyed in minutes. Linda Hayes was crying at her station. Bob Carter stared at the screens in shock. The other officers sat in silence as their home died around them. But Ben wasn't watching the destruction anymore. He was watching something else on his screens, something that made him smile for the first time in hours. High above New Colorado, invisible to Vorthic sensors, a small probe had been recording everything that happened. The probe had been there for months, waiting and watching, just like similar probes around every human world. As New Colorado burned, the probe transmitted everything it had seen to a destination that no alien species knew existed. The transmission included Scareth's laughter, his threats, and most importantly, his rejection of humanity's final peaceful warning. When the Vorthic finished destroying New Colorado, they broadcast their victory across the galaxy. Scareth appeared on communication networks everywhere, standing in front of the burning planet. "See how easily the humans fall," he announced. "Their warnings are meaningless. Their 'please don't make us mad' is the cry of weaklings who cannot defend themselves." The broadcast was picked up by news services on 1,000 worlds. Within hours, the phrase "please don't make us mad" became a joke shared across the galaxy. Alien comedians used it in their acts. Social networks filled with memes mocking human weakness. On the trading station at Rigel 7, a group of Astery crystal beings laughed as they watched the broadcast. "The humans beg nicely even as they lose their worlds," one of them said. On the manufacturing world of Kepler 9, Zephyrian refugees who had lost their own homes to the Vorthic felt no sympathy for the humans. "At least we fought back," Unit Commander Thrix told his surviving hive mates. "The humans just said please and died." The mockery spread everywhere. "Please don't make us mad" appeared on t-shirts, coffee mugs, and advertising displays. The galaxy had found its new favorite joke at humanity's expense. But while the aliens were laughing, other things were happening that they didn't notice. On Earth, President Helen Morgan received a report that made her close her eyes and take a deep breath. The report was simple. New Colorado is gone. 30,000 civilians evacuated. Scareth rejected final warning. Helen walked to a window. in her office and looked out at the peaceful city below. For 50 years, humanity had chosen this path. For 50 years, they had tried to be better than they had been before joining the Federation. She picked up a secure communication device that hadn't been used in decades. "This is the President," she said into the device. "Authorization code 77 Alpha. Begin activation of the Terran Protocol." On the moon, in facilities that most humans had forgotten existed, Admiral Kate Sullivan received the message she had been waiting for since she was assigned to this position 20 years ago. Admiral Sullivan had never appeared in any public records. Her name wasn't known to the Federation, the alien species, or even most humans. She commanded ships and facilities that officially didn't exist, maintained by people who had spent there entire careers preparing for a day they hoped would never come. Kate looked at the message from Earth and felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. Not excitement, not anger, but a cold satisfaction that the waiting was finally over. She activated communication systems that reached across human space to ships and bases that no alien intelligence service had ever discovered. "All units, this is Admiral Sullivan." She broadcast on channels that didn't officially exist. "The Terran Protocol is now active. Repeat, Terran Protocol is active. Begin Phase 1 operations immediately." Across the galaxy, humans who had spent 50 years being peaceful diplomats and traders received messages that changed everything. Captain Jake Morrison, still commanding the U's Harmony, stared at orders that told him to report to Luna Base for immediate reconfiguration. Dr. Lisa Carter, reading alien cultural reports on her tablet, received a message that made her hands shake. She was being reassigned to something called Xenocultural Analysis Division, Military Applications. Commander Ben Taylor, floating in an escape pod after his planet's destruction, was picked up by a ship that shouldn't have existed. A crew wore uniforms he had never seen before. Captain Jake Morrison had been flying through space for 20 years, but he had never seen anything like Luna Base. A massive facility hidden on the dark side of Earth's moon looked like it belonged in a different universe. Jake guided the U's Harmony toward the docking bay, following instructions from traffic controllers who spoke with military precision he had never heard from human voices before. Around him, hundreds of other ships were arriving. Exploration vessels, cargo haulers, passenger liners, and research ships. All of them had received the same mysterious orders to report for immediate reconfiguration. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her navigation station, "I'm reading some strange signatures from those ships in Dock 7. Jake looked at his screens and felt confused. The ships Amy was pointing to looked like normal human vessels, but his sensors were showing energy readings that didn't make sense. Some of the cargo ships were putting out power levels that should have been impossible for their size. "Must be sensor errors," Jake said, but he wasn't convinced. When the Harmony docked, Jake and his crew were met by personnel wearing uniforms. None of them recognized. The uniforms were black with silver trim, and the people wearing them moved with a precision that reminded Jake of military documentaries from before the Federation. "Captain Morrison," said a woman with commander's stripes Jake didn't recognize. "I'm Commander Sarah Wilson. Please bring your senior staff to briefing room 12. Your crew will be processed through orientation." "Processed?" Jake asked. "What's happening here?" Commander Wilson looked at him with eyes that seemed much older than her face. "The galaxy has made its choice, Captain. Now we make ours." Jake followed Wilson through corridors filled with activity he had never seen before. Technicians worked on equipment that looked advanced beyond anything he knew about. Engineers discussed modifications using terms he didn't understand. Everything moved with purpose and urgency. In briefing room 12, Jake found other ship captains looking just as confused as he felt. Dr. Lisa Carter was there, along with dozens of other people from across human space. All of them had the same questions in their eyes. Admiral Kate Sullivan entered the room, and Jake felt the temperature drop. The woman was average height with gray hair, but she commanded attention in a way that made everyone sit straighter. Her uniform was the same black and silver as the others, but with more decorations than Jake had ever seen on any human. "Welcome to Luna Base," Admiral Sullivan said. Her voice was calm, but carried authority that made Jake think of old war movies. "I know you all have questions. I'm going to answer them." She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy with human colonies marked in blue. Many of the blue dots were now red. 3 months ago, the Vorthic Empire began systematic attacks on human settlements. They have destroyed 17 colonies, killed 43,000 civilians, and announced their intention to conquer Earth itself. Jake felt sick. He had known about New Colorado, but 17 colonies? "The Federation has done nothing," Admiral Sullivan continued. "Our allies have abandoned us. Our enemies see us as easy targets. For 50 years, we have asked nicely for peace. The galaxy has responded by laughing at our weakness." She pressed another control, and the display changed to show ship designs Jake had never seen before. "These are the modifications your vessels will receive. New engines, new weapons, new defensive systems. Technology that we have kept hidden since we joined the Federation." "Hidden technology?" asked Captain Maria Santos from the UES Explorer. "Why would we hide our own technology?" Admiral Sullivan smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Because we hoped we would never need it. 50 years ago, humanity made a choice. We decided to be better than we were. We chose peace over war, diplomacy over destruction." The display showed images from human history that Jake had never seen in any textbook. Ships that looked like they could tear planets apart. Weapons that bent space and time. Soldiers in armor that made them look like walking nightmares. "This is what we were before the Federation," Admiral Sullivan said. "We were the apex predators of known space. We conquered everything we found. We destroyed civilizations that opposed. U.S., we were very good at war." Jake stared at the images, trying to understand what he was seeing. The ships in the pictures looked human, but they were nothing like the peaceful vessels he knew. "When we discovered the Federation, we made a decision," the Admiral continued. "We could join as conquerors and rule the galaxy through fear. Or we could join as friends and try to build something better." She turned off the display and looked directly at Jake and the other captains. "We chose to be friends. We hid our weapons, restricted our military technology, and trained our people to be diplomats instead of warriors. We said please because we hoped that would be enough." Dr. Lisa Carter raised her hand. "Why didn't anyone tell us about this? Why keep it secret from our own people?" "Because we wanted to be genuinely peaceful," Admiral Sullivan replied. "We wanted our children to grow up without the burden of our violent past. We wanted to prove that a warlike species could choose to change." She walked to the window, looking out at Earth hanging in space. "For 50 years, it worked. We became known as peacemakers. We helped other species solve their problems. We made the galaxy a safer, more stable place. And we did it by choosing to be weak when we could have been strong." Jake thought about all the times he had mediated disputes between alien species, all the times he had helped negotiate trade agreements and peace treaties. He had been proud of that work. But the galaxy saw our choice as proof that we were naturally weak, Admiral Sullivan continued. "They forgot that choosing peace and being incapable of war are very different things." She turned back to face them. "The Vorthic have made it clear that they intend to exterminate humanity. They have rejected every peaceful overture, ignored every warning, and laughed at every attempt at negotiation. They see our restraint as surrender." The room was completely silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. "So we are done asking nicely," Admiral Sullivan said. "The Terran Protocol is now active. Every human military facility that has been hidden for 50 years is coming online. Every ship that has been disguised as civilian is being revealed. Every weapon we swore never to use again is being prepared." She activated controls on the wall, and the windows of the briefing room became transparent screens showing the space around Luna Base. Jake gasped at what he saw. Hundreds of ships were moving in formation around the moon. But these weren't the ships that had arrived. These were warships that looked like they could fight gods. They were sleek, deadly, and covered with weapon systems that hurt to look at. These ships had been waiting in hidden bases throughout human space, Admiral Sullivan explained, maintained by personnel who swore to serve in a war they hoped would never come. Crewed by volunteers who trained their entire lives for a mission they prayed they would never need to complete. Jake watched the warships moving in perfect formation and felt something he had never experienced before. It wasn't fear exactly, but it was close. These ships looked like they belonged in nightmares. "Your civilian vessels will be modified with some of our hidden technology," Admiral Sullivan said. "You will serve as support ships for our main fleet. Your knowledge of alien cultures and diplomatic protocols will help us minimize unnecessary casualties." "Casualties?" Jake asked. "We're going to war?" Admiral Sullivan looked at him with those ancient eyes. "Captain Morrison, we have been at war. For 3 months. We just haven't been fighting back yet." She pressed another control, and a new image appeared on the displays. It showed War Chief Scareth standing over the burning ruins of New Colorado, laughing as he announced humanity's weakness to the galaxy. "Scareth and his fleet are currently heading toward Earth. They expect to find a defenseless world protected by ships like yours. They plan to broadcast our destruction across the galaxy as proof that humans are not worth respecting." Jake felt something change inside him as he watched the alien warrior mock his species. "What they will find instead," Admiral Sullivan continued, "is the reason we spent 50 years asking them to please not make us mad." She stood up, and everyone else in the room followed. "You have 6 hours to prepare your ships and crews. At 0800 tomorrow, we will meet the Vorthik fleet at the edge of our solar system. We will show them what happens when a peaceful species decides that peace has failed." As Jake and the others filed out of the briefing room, he heard Admiral Sullivan speak one more time. "The galaxy laughed when we said, 'Please don't make us mad.' Tomorrow, they learn why we said please." Jake walked back to his ship through corridors filled with purposeful activity. Technicians were installing equipment that looked like it belonged in science fiction movies. Engineers were discussing weapon systems with casual expertise that suggested years of hidden training. On the Harmony's bridge, Amy Brooks was staring at new control panels that had been installed while they were in the briefing. "Captain," she said quietly, "what are we becoming?" Jake looked at the weapons controls that had appeared on his peaceful exploration ship. He thought about the warships he had seen, about Admiral Sullivan's ancient eyes, about the laughter of aliens who thought humans were weak. War Chief Scareth stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Destroyer of Worlds, watching the small blue planet grow larger on his screens. Earth looked so peaceful, so defenseless. He could see the lights of human cities twinkling on the night. Sighed, completely unaware that their destruction was approaching. "My lord," said his second-in-command, "we are detecting human ships moving to intercept us." Scareth laughed. "How many?" "Approximately 200 vessels, my lord." 200? Scareth's laughter grew louder. "The humans send their entire pathetic fleet to face us? We have 800 warships. This will be over in minutes." Behind him, the other Vorthik commanders joined in the laughter. They had conquered 17 human colonies without losing a single ship. Human weapons couldn't even scratch Vorthic armor. Human shields collapsed after a few shots. Fighting humans was like stepping on insects. "Broadcast our arrival to the galaxy," Scareth commanded. "Let everyone watch as we crush the species that begged us to not make them mad." The transmission went out across known space. Within minutes, news services on 1,000 worlds were announcing the final battle for Earth. Viewing parties started on alien worlds where people gathered to watch humanity's last stand. On the trading station at Rigel 7, Asteri crystal beings made bets on how long Earth would survive. 10 minutes, said one. 5 minutes, said another. They all laughed at the generous odds. On Kepler 9, Zephyrian refugees watched the approaching battle with cold satisfaction. "The humans will learn what we learned," Unit Commander Thrix told his hive mates. "Weakness leads to extinction." But as the Vorthic fleet approached Earth, something strange happened. The human ships that came to meet them didn't look like the vessels they had been destroying for months. "My lord," said the sensor operator, "these ships are different. I'm reading power signatures that don't match our records." Scareth looked at his displays. The human ships were sleek and deadly looking, nothing like the peaceful exploration vessels and cargo haulers he was used to fighting. "Doesn't matter," he said. "Humans are weak. Their ships are toys. Begin the attack." The first Vorthic wave, 50 of their most powerful warships, accelerated toward the human fleet. These were the same ships that had destroyed Zephyrian hive cities and turned human colonies into ash. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony. But his ship was no longer the peaceful exploration vessel it had been yesterday. The modifications from Luna Base had transformed it into something that looked like it could fight stars. "Paul ships, this is Captain Morrison," he broadcast to the human fleet. "Remember what Admiral Sullivan told us. We are not conquerors. We are not here to destroy for the sake of destruction. We are here to end this war." Around him, his crew worked controls that none of them had known existed 24 hours ago. Amy Brooks, his young navigation officer, was now operating weapon systems that could crack planets. The changes in his people were as dramatic as the changes in his ship. "Enemy fleet approaching," reported Lieutenant Bob Carter, who had been rescued from New Colorado and assigned to the Harmony. "They're moving in standard Vorthic attack formation." Jake looked at the screens, showing the approaching alien ships. For months, these vessels had been destroying human homes, killing human families, laughing at human weakness. "Open a channel to the Vorthic flagship," Jake ordered. War Chief Scareth's massive face appeared on the screen, showing his knife-like teeth in what passed for a smile. "Ah, the human fleet comes to die," Scareth said. "We will make this quick, so you don't suffer too much." "War Chief," Jake said calmly, "this is your final warning. Turn your ships around and leave the system. We don't want to hurt you." The laughter from the Vorthic bridge was so loud it hurt to hear. Scareth could barely speak through his amusement. "You don't want to hurt us?" he gasped. "The farmers and diplomats don't want to hurt the mighty Vorthic Empire? This is the funniest thing I have ever heard." "We asked you nicely," Jake said. "We said please. You chose not to listen. And now you will die for your weakness," Scareth replied. "Attack." The 50 Vorthic ships opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams that could melt mountains struck the human fleet. Missiles that could destroy cities exploded against human shields. The weapons that had conquered half the galaxy unleashed their fury. But nothing happened. The human ships sat in space, completely undamaged. Their shields had absorbed the attack without even flickering. "What?" Scareth stared at his screens in disbelief. "How is this possible?" Jake looked at the Vorthic fleet with something that might have been pity. "You asked us not to be weak," he said. "You wanted to see what we looked like when we weren't asking nicely. Here we are." Fire, Jake ordered quietly. The human fleet opened fire, and the laws of physics seemed to change. The weapons they used didn't just destroy the Vorthic ships, they unmade them. 50 warships that had conquered worlds simply stopped existing. They didn't explode or burn or break apart. One moment they were there, and the next moment they were gone. Across the galaxy, aliens watching the battle fell silent. The viewing parties stopped laughing. The bets on humanity's survival were forgotten. Impossible, whispered an Asteri observer. Those ships just disappeared. On the Vorthic flagship, Scareth stared at empty space where his attack force had been. His bridge crew was silent, their reptilian faces showing an emotion they rarely experienced. Fear. What are you? Scareth asked, his voice barely a whisper. We are what we chose not to be, Jake replied. We are the species that spent 50 years trying to be better than our nature. We are the predators that learned to be protectors. We are the warriors that chose to be peacemakers. Jake looked directly at Scareth through the screen. We are the humans you wouldn't stop making mad. Admiral Kate Sullivan's voice came through the communication system, broadcasting to the entire Vorthic fleet. This is Admiral Sullivan of the Terran Defense Force. You have 15 minutes to surrender your ships and submit to Federation justice for war crimes. Any vessel that does not comply will be removed from existence. Scareth found his voice again. You cannot defeat us all. We have 800 ships. You have only 200. Numbers don't matter when you're fighting with toys, Admiral Sullivan replied. You've been using the same weapons technology for 300 years. You conquered weak species and thought that made you strong. You never faced a civilization that chose to be peaceful instead of being forced to be weak. On the bridge of her flagship, the TDF Retribution, Admiral Sullivan watched the Vorthic fleet through sensors that could see into other dimensions. The alien ships looked pathetic compared to human technology that had been refined in secret for 50 years. You see, she continued, when a warlike species chooses peace, they don't forget how to fight. They just get better at it while they're not fighting. Some of the Vorthic ships tried to run. They activated their fastest engines and fled toward the edge of the solar system. But the human ships were faster, much faster. Commander Ben Taylor, now serving aboard the TDF Vengeance, watched the fleeing Vorthic vessels with cold satisfaction. These were the same type of ships that had destroyed his home, killed his friends, burned his world to ash. Should we pursue them, sir? Asked his weapons officer. No need, Ben replied. Watch. The human ships didn't chase the fleeing Vorthic vessels. Instead, they simply appeared next to them. The technology that moved human ships through space didn't rely on speed. It relied on folding space itself. One by one, the fleeing ships were captured or destroyed. The Vorthic warriors, who had laughed at human weakness, found themselves helpless against human strength. Dr. Lisa Carter, now serving as xenocultural analyst aboard the TDF Enlightenment, monitored communications across the galaxy. What she heard made her smile grimly. Admiral, she reported, we're getting reaction from across known space. The laughter has stopped. On Rigel 7, the Asteri crystal beings watched in stunned silence as the Vorthic Empire's most powerful fleet was systematically dismantled by ships they had considered toys. On Kepler 9, Unit Commander Thrix and his Zephyrian refugees stared at their screens in amazement. Perhaps, Thrix said quietly, we misunderstood what human warnings meant. Back on Earth, President Helen Morgan watched the battle from the Situation Room. For 50 years, she and her predecessors had maintained the fiction that humanity was naturally peaceful. They had hidden the truth about human military capability, hoping that truth would never be needed. Ma'am, said her military advisor, The Vorthic fleet is requesting surrender terms. Helen nodded. Put me through to Admiral Sullivan. The Admiral's face appeared on screen, and Helen could see the weight of command in her eyes. Kate Sullivan had spent 20 years preparing for this moment, training for a war she hoped would never come. Admiral, Helen said, what are your recommendations? Complete surrender, Sullivan replied. We accept custody of all Vorthic personnel for war crimes trials. We confiscate all military vessels. We place the Vorthic Empire under Federation oversight until they can prove they're no longer a threat to civilian populations. Helen thought about the 30,000 people who had died on New Colorado, about the 17 colonies that had been destroyed, about the laughter that had echoed across the galaxy when humans asked nicely for peace. 1 month after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was a very different place. President Helen Morgan stood before the Galactic Federation Council, looking out at representatives from hundreds of worlds. The same aliens who had laughed at human. Warnings now watched her with careful attention. For 50 years, Helen said, her voice carrying across the great chamber, humanity chose to be your friends instead of your rulers. We hid our strength because we hoped strength wouldn't be necessary. We said please because we wanted to give you every chance to choose peace. The council chamber was completely silent. Helen could see fear in some faces, confusion in others, and in a few, something that might have been respect. You mistook our choice for weakness. You saw our restraint as inability. When we warned you not to make us angry, you laughed because you thought we had nothing to be angry with. She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Human ships were everywhere, maintaining order in systems that had been chaotic just weeks before. The Vorthic Empire has surrendered unconditionally. Their war. Criminals are being tried under Federation law. Their civilian populations are being protected and fed by human relief efforts. Their former slaves have been freed and are receiving aid to rebuild their worlds. Helen paused, letting that information settle. But the Vorthic were not the only ones who learned the wrong lesson from human kindness. A display changed to show other systems where human ships had intervened in the past month. Pirates who had preyed on shipping lanes, thinking humans were too weak to stop them. Warlords who had enslaved entire planets, believing the Federation was powerless. Criminal organizations that had operated openly, confident that nobody would challenge them. All of them had discovered what the Vorthic learned too late. Admiral Kate Sullivan entered the chamber, walking with the quiet confidence of someone who had just reshaped the galaxy. She wore her black and silver uniform, and Helen noticed that many of the alien representatives couldn't look directly at her. Admiral Sullivan will now brief the Council on current military operations. Helen announced. Kate stepped forward and ACTIVADED new displays showing fleet positions across known space. Human forces are currently engaged in 17 different systems, she reported. We are eliminating pirate bases, freeing slave worlds, and restoring order to regions that have been lawless for decades. She looked directly at several alien representatives whose species had been involved in some of those activities. We are not conquering these systems. We are cleaning them up. The difference is important. An Astery representative, his crystal, body flickering with nervous energy, raised a limb. Admiral, with respect, what gives humanity the right to police the galaxy? Kate's smile was not pleasant. The same thing that gave the Vorthic the right to destroy human colonies. The same thing that gave pirates the right to raid peaceful ships. The same thing that gave slavers the right to sell children. She paused, letting the meaning sink in. Power. The difference is what we do with that power. Captain Jake Morrison was not at the Federation Council meeting. He was in the Helix systems, the same worlds that the Vorthic and Zephyrians had fought over just months before. But now the situation was very different. Jake stood in a conference room on Helix Prime, mediating between Zephyrian survivors and Vorthic civilians. The difference was that now, when Jake warned people not to make humans angry, they listened very carefully. The Zephyrians want their sacred burial sites protected, Jake explained to the Vorthic colonists. The Vorthic need farming land for their families. Both needs can be met if we work together. A Vorthic representative, a civilian named Kethmar, nodded quickly. Yes, Captain Morrison. We will respect the burial sites. We want no conflict with the humans. The Zephyrian speaker, Unit Secondary Vex, clicked in agreement. The Hive finds human solutions acceptable. We will cooperate with the farming settlements. Jake smiled, but it was different from the diplomatic smiles he used to give. There was something behind it now, something that made aliens very motivated. To find peaceful solutions. Excellent, Jake said. The human garrison will remain in system to ensure the agreement is maintained. I'm sure there won't be any problems. There wouldn't be. Jake was certain of that. Not because the aliens had suddenly become peaceful, but because they had learned what happened to species that broke agreements with humans. Dr. Lisa Carter was on the planet Rigel 7, studying how the revelation of human military power had changed alien cultures. Her research was fascinating and disturbing. The psychological impact has been enormous, she reported to Admiral Sullivan over secure communication. Many species are reconsidering their entire understanding of power dynamics. She looked out the window of her research station at the Astery city below. The crystal beings who had once mocked human weakness now moved differently, spoke differently, even thought differently. The Astery are restructuring their entire philosophy, Lisa continued. They're trying to understand how a species can choose to appear weak when they're actually strong. It's breaking some of their fundamental assumptions about the universe. Admiral Sullivan's image nodded from the communication screen. What about the others? The Zephyrians are the most adaptable. They're already incorporating human tactical concepts into their hive mind decision-making. The other species are having more trouble. Lisa brought up data on her tablet. 17 different civilizations have sent diplomatic missions to Earth. In the past month, they all want to negotiate new treaties. They're very eager to be humanity's friends now. And the ones who haven't sent missions? Lisa's expression grew serious. They're the ones we're watching carefully. Some species are talking about forming alliances against human expansion. They don't understand that we're not trying to expand. Back on Earth, President Helen Morgan was dealing with exactly that problem. In her office, she met with Ambassador Paul Rodriguez, who had returned from months of failed diplomatic missions with a new understanding of his species' place in the galaxy. Ma'am, Paul said, we're getting reports of secret meetings between several minor species. They're afraid that humanity is planning to conquer the galaxy. Helen looked tired. The past month had been the most difficult of her presidency. Leading a peaceful species was hard enough. Leading a species that everyone now knew could destroy civilizations was much worse. What do our intelligence reports say? Admiral Sullivan's people are monitoring the situation. The species involved are mostly ones that have been profiting from the chaos we've been cleaning up. Slave traders, pirates, arms dealers. They're afraid we're going to shut down their operations. We are going to shut down their operations, Helen said firmly. Yes, ma'am. But they don't know that we'll stop there. They think this is just the beginning of human expansion. Helen walked to her window and looked out at the city. People were going about their normal lives, but everything was different now. Earth was no longer a peaceful world that other species ignored. It was the center of the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Set up a meeting with their representatives, she decided, face to face. Let them hear directly from me what humanity's intentions are. 2 weeks later, Helen stood before a gathering of alien ambassadors in a conference room on the neutral station at Kepler Prime. These were representatives from species that were genuinely afraid of human power, not the criminals and warlords who deserve to be afraid. I want to be very clear about something, Helen said, looking each ambassador in the eye. Humanity did not reveal our military capabilities because we want to rule the galaxy. We revealed them because we were forced to defend ourselves. A representative from the Kelani Republic, a species of peaceful traders, spoke up. President Morgan, how can we be certain that human expansion will stop? Your ships are in dozens of systems. Your military grows stronger every day. Helen had expected this question. Because we don't want to rule you. We never wanted to rule anyone. That's why we spent 50 years hiding our strength. She activated a display showing human fleet positions. Look at what our ships are doing. They're protecting trade routes, freeing slaves, stopping pirates, and maintaining peace. They're not conquering territory or demanding tribute. Another ambassador from the Tau Collective asked, "But what happens if we disagree with your decisions? What if we don't want human protection?" Helen's expression became serious. That depends on what you disagree about. If you want to trade freely, govern yourselves, and live in peace, we have no quarrel with you. If you want to raid your neighbors, enslave other species, or support criminals, then we have a problem. She looked around the room at the worried faces. For 50 years, we asked nicely for the galaxy to police itself. We said, please don't make us mad, because we hoped you would choose to be better without us having to make you. That didn't work. Helen's voice carried the same edge that Admiral Sullivan's had during the battle. So now we're not asking. We're telling you how things are going to be. The galaxy will be peaceful. Trade will be free and fair. Slavery will end. Piracy will stop. War crimes will be punished. She paused, letting her words settle. You can help. You build this better galaxy, or you can get out of our way. But you cannot stop us, and you cannot go back to the way things were.